They say a new job should bring peace of mind. But the day I stepped into the Obidike mansion, I walked straight into a nightmare. My name is Ada, and I was just a poor girl looking for honest work. When the agency called me for the placement, I thought it was my breakthrough. Big family, big pay, the woman at the agency said. She even smiled too much as she handed me the contract. Maybe that should have been my first warning. The Obidike mansion stood alone on a quiet street. It was the kind of house that made you feel small, tall iron gates, and windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. Even the air around it felt heavy. Madam welcomed me at the door. She was tall, graceful, and her perfume was so strong it stung my nose. You will find peace here, she said, smiling with all her teeth. We are a quiet family. Quiet. I clung to that word. Inside, the house looked even stranger. Old portraits covered the walls, each showing members of the family from different generations. None of them smiled. Their painted eyes followed me no matter where I stood. I felt as though the house itself was watching. The family was made up of 5 people. Mr. Obidike, the father, tall, with a voice so deep it could shake a room. He rarely spoke to me, but when he did, it was like a command. Madam, elegant and sharp, with a smile that never reached her eyes. Their 2 children, Chidima and Nonso, teenagers who never argued, never laughed, and never acted like normal children. They moved like shadows. And the grandmother, Mama Uju, always in her rocking chair. Her eyes were cloudy, as though blind, but I felt her gaze more than anyone else's. From the beginning, something felt off. On my first evening, I noticed there were no mirrors in the house. Not a single one, except the small one in my maid's quarters. When I asked Madam about it, she said, mirrors distract the soul. Then she changed the topic. At dinner, I noticed something else. The family never talked while eating. Not a word. Their spoons clinked softly, their chewing was silent, and their eyes stayed on their plates. The silence was suffocating. I swallowed each bite like stone. When I went to bed that night, I told myself it was just their way. Different people, different habits. But then came 2 a.m. The sound woke me instantly. At first, I thought it was the whine of the wind against the windows. But soon it grew clearer, layered. Voices. Singing. I sat up in bed, clutching the blanket. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, a deep, throaty chant woven with high, piercing tones. I tried to convince myself it was a prayer session. Many families prayed at night. But the longer I listened, the more certain I became, these were no prayers. The vibrations filled the house. I swear the walls themselves hummed. Against my better judgment, I tiptoed into the corridor. My bare feet made no sound on the polished floor. The singing grew louder as I approached the living room. My heart pounded so hard I thought they would hear it. I reached the door and pressed my eye to the tiny crack. That was when my blood ran cold. The family was standing in a perfect circle. Mr. Obidike, Madam, the 2 children, their hands were linked, their heads tilted back, their eyes shut tight. In the center of the circle sat a large clay bowl filled with water. But the water glowed. Faint, bluish light pulsed from it, casting eerie shadows across their faces. Each time their voices rose, the water rippled, glowing brighter, as though answering their call. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop a scream. The language twisted through the air like smoke, heavy and wrong. At times, it sounded like crying, at times, like laughter. Then it happened. Mama Uju's eyes snapped open. Those milky, blind eyes fixed directly on me through the crack in the door. Her lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, but she never stopped singing. I stumbled back, my body frozen with fear. My breath came fast, my heart a drum in my chest. Somehow, I forced myself back to my room, locked the door, and pressed my back against it until their voices faded. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I half believed it was a dream. But when I entered the living room, I froze. The clay bowl was gone, but there was a faint wet ring on the floor where it had stood. The family acted normal, as if nothing had happened. Chidinma even greeted me with a smile, her first since I arrived. That smile chilled me more than the singing. That night, it happened again. And again. Always at 2 a.m. Always the same circle. Always the same glowing bowl. But I began to notice something else. Each time they sang, the water level dropped. Just slightly, but I saw it. And last night, I heard whispers in my room. Not singing. Whispers. The same strange language, calling around me in the dark. I looked into the small mirror above my bed, and my heart almost stopped. For a split second, I saw them. The entire family, standing behind me, mouths open wide in silent song. But when I turned, the room was empty. Now I know. They didn't hire me to clean. They brought me here for something else. And I fear that when that glowing water finally dries up, I will learn exactly what that something is. I did not sleep the night after I saw them in my mirror. How could I? Every shadow in my room seemed alive. Every creak of the house carried whispers I could not understand. I sat on the floor, clutching my knees, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, I dragged myself out, expecting at least a hint of suspicion from the family. But no. They were the same as always. Madam sat at the dining table, dressed in her silk robe, sipping tea. Mr. Obidike read the newspaper, his glasses perched neatly on his nose. Chidinma and Nonso prepared for school. Even Mama Uju sat in her rocking chair, humming faintly to herself. "Good morning, Ada," Madam said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" I almost laughed. "Sleep? Yes, Ma," I forced myself to answer, though my lips trembled. They looked at me as though nothing had happened. As though they had not filled the house with their unholy songs just hours before. That was how every day went. Normal greetings, polite words, silent meals. Then midnight came, and the house changed. The second night, I stayed in my bed, praying, clutching my rosary, but their voices pierced through the walls. The chants grew heavier, angrier, until I thought the ceiling itself would crack open. I bit my lips to stop myself from screaming. By the third night, the singing no longer stayed in the living room. I could hear it in my corridor. I could hear it in my walls. The whispers pressed against my ears as though someone stood breathing just beside me. And the bowl. I never saw them bring it in during the day, but every night at 2 a.m., it was there. And each time, the glowing water sank lower. I began to wonder what would happen when the bowl finally emptied. On the fourth night, something changed. As I sat trembling in my bed, I heard the footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps down the hall. They stopped right outside my door. The singing was louder now, echoing as if the whole house had become a throat. My door handle rattled softly. I pressed my hand to my mouth, shaking. The handle stopped moving. Then came a whisper, right against my door, "Ada." I nearly fainted. The next morning, I forced myself to step out, expecting them to mock me, to accuse me of spying, to drag me back into the circle. But once again, they were normal. "Good morning, Ada," Nonso greeted, smiling like a regular teenage boy. Madam asked me to make pap for breakfast. Mr. Obidike nodded at me like nothing had happened. The normality was worse than the singing. It made me doubt myself. Was I going mad? But each night reminded me I was not mad. By the end of my first week, fear had swallowed me whole. My hands shook as I scrubbed the floors. I jumped at every sound. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. The Obidikes did not question me. Perhaps they were waiting. That was when I knew I could not stay. I told myself I would resign. Quietly. Without fuss. But how could I even explain what I had seen? Who would believe me? The decision came on its own. It was a Saturday morning. Madam handed me a list and some money. Ada, go to the market, she said. We are expecting a guest tonight. Buy these things so I can prepare a meal. A guest. The way she said it sent a chill crawling down my spine. I took the list with trembling hands, tied my scarf, and stepped out of the gates. That was my chance. I did not look back. I did not even enter the market. I walked, then ran, my slippers slapping against the dusty road until the mansion was far behind me. I never returned to that house. To this day, I wonder who the guest was meant to be that night. And I wonder, if I had stayed, would I have been the meal?